And joining us now for a special panel discussion on this dramatic and historic day, our Colonel in the Reserves, Miri Eisin from the International Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University, Norman Roule from United Against a Nuclear Iran, and Professor Meir Litvak, head of the Alliance Center for Iranian Studies at Tel Aviv University. Thank you all for joining us today. Miri, I'd like to start with you. You know, what do we know so far about the U.S. strikes? Are we able to say now that Iran's nuclear program has been wiped out?
I don't know that we can use the term wiped out. I can say that the United States, and they just did a very big press conference about it, certainly attacked it with a type of capability that I have not seen before. This idea of bringing in both the bombers themselves, the type of munitions that were used, coming in the way that they did, they certainly put at it the immense firepower that we've been talking about, I'll say even for years, certainly in the last 10 days, that they are the game changer. We're not going to know what the results are. It takes time to understand that. A day, two, they've certainly damaged them heavily, but I can't say that they've been wiped out.
And Norman, I want to turn to you. What can we expect now of the United States? You know, was this a one-time bombing, or are they going to continue assisting in this war?
Good afternoon to you, to the fellow panel members, and to your viewers. The nature of the American attack was extraordinary. The munitions involved are the most sophisticated and advanced conventional weapons in the U.S. inventory. It would be extraordinary if anything of consequence survived in the Iranian target set. If something has survived, then you can expect a follow-on attack if it's deemed necessary, but I see this as very unlikely. The U.S. follow-on attacks on additional targets would depend upon Iran's response. If Iran were to expand the war to U.S. targets in the Gulf or U.S. targets elsewhere, there is no question in my mind that President Trump would order retaliation against Iran. So in this instance, Iran's actions will dictate the course of America's future involvement.
Interesting. And Miri, back to you. You know, despite the U.S. strike, the IDF, even at this hour, is continuing to hit Iranian military and nuclear facilities. What happens now in terms of the IDF? I mean, what more does Israel need to do to eliminate the overall threat from the Iranian regime?
The Israeli Defense Forces, mainly with the Israeli Air Force, the IAF, have been attacking 5 different types of targets. One of them is the nuclear. What the United States did early this morning makes certainly the main focus of the nuclear moot. As Norman said, it's hard to believe anything's left there, but there are additional nuclear sites, and Israel was attacking them as well. But I'll focus for a moment on the other 4 types of targets, because we've been attacking all of them for the last 10 days, and we will continue to attack them in the meantime. One is you have to attack the air defense systems, meaning you have to keep the air superiority. That's something that's going to be ongoing. The second is that we are attacking both the missile launch sites, the drone launch sites, and that's a whole ongoing aspect. We've been mainly attacking missiles and drones that can reach Israel. Iran still has lots of capabilities of rather what I'm going to call short-range missiles and others that could attack both U.S., other allies in the area, but they don't have the same ranges to Israel. But what we're also attacking is the industrial facilities that are making both the missiles, the weaponization, the different aspect of the drones to really push that Iranian military industry that has been so broad, pushing it back. So I've already given you 3 more types of targets. Last but not least at all, Israel has been directly attacking the commanders, the decision makers of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard in a very broad sense. Those who command the missiles, the drones, those who both command, develop, and would have been the future of that nuclear capability, those who are responsible for the connections with the different proxies of sending all of the weaponry to the proxies. So I just gave you a whole list of targets, which is long enough for us to continue to be attacking in Iran as long as we have this air superiority for a time period, to continue with the nuclear if need be, but also to continue missiles, installations, air industry, and especially the commanders.
Absolutely, a long list of targets, and the IDF spokesperson said just today that Israel is prepared for a prolonged operation. Now, Professor Litvak, I want to turn to you. I want to ask you what's happening now inside of Iran. We know there's almost no internet for some time now, but can you maybe give us an idea of what is happening inside the country today?
I would make a distinction between the regime and the people. I think the UN regime is in a very serious trouble. They're very serious dilemma. Their entire strategy, which they've been building for 20 years or more, 30 years, has collapsed. Now the nuclear project is set back, not completely destroyed, by the way, but set back. The proxies strategy has failed, and the ballistic missiles are not very successful. So now Iran, from its point of view, finds itself in a way defenseless and also humiliated. That puts the regime in a very serious dilemma and a quandary. Now, the Iranian people, I think, I would say there's probably a mixture of great anxiety, fear, shortages of fuel, maybe even of food in some places, the sense that things are going on very badly. At the same time, it is possible, but we cannot know because everything is shut down, that because of an external attack, there may be some popular rallying behind the regime. But I also believe that many Iranians ask themselves, why has Iran squandered tens of billions of dollars in the past 20 or 30 years on proxies and on weapons that eventually, when the day came, they failed? That may have long-term repercussions in Iran. There's also another issue which we cannot know at the time being, whether or not the barrier of fear from the regime, that is, many people in Iran loathe the regime. They want a change, but they're afraid to come out to the streets because of this regime has been very effective and very brutal in suppressing popular protests. It is possible that because of that attack, because the regime suffered humiliation, this aura of power of the regime will be weakened, and that may embolden people to act. At the same time, you could say that the regime, feeling threatened, feeling humiliated, may now react much more forcefully, much more brutally against any sign of protest. So therefore, in this sense, we cannot tell right now. It's too early to say what will be the impact on the popular responses or the population attitudes toward the government.
And Professor Litvak, I want to come back to you in a moment about what's going on inside of Iran. Norman, I want to turn to you. I want to also ask about the response to U.S. involvement from both within the United States and the international community. Russia and China have condemned this strike. That's not a surprise. So has the UN Secretary General. Also not a surprise. But the U.S. and Israel really are ridding the world of a major nuclear threat. So what is the reaction that you're seeing to this in the United States, as well as in the Gulf states and internationally?
Well, within the United States, there is a political aspect to this. Some Democratic leaders have come out against the action, stating that the president lacked the authority to undertake this military operation without congressional approval, and that they will pursue action against the president, perhaps up to impeachment. It's very unlikely to succeed. That is not unexpected. Internationally, the statement by the United Nations, which has had no practical impact against the Iranian issue for many, many years, is expected. Russia and China are allies of the Iranians, and they have protected Iran in all international fora. But they're very unlikely to join Iran, say, with military support or other action which would stand in the way of the ongoing military operations. So I think it's the United States and Israel which will continue the initiative. Now, within the Gulf, they do not want to see this expand to a regional conflict. They have enormous equities which are at stake. Chaos in Iran would bring terrible consequences for the region. It is one thing to have Iran's nuclear program destroyed and its missile program reduced, but beyond that, there are powerful commercial, economic, and political equities they need to consider. There is a significant diplomatic initiative by all GCC states to contain the violence, to lower the temperature. Whether or not it will succeed, we'll see, but they are in communication with all parties, to include Iran, urging restraint.
Absolutely. And Professor Litvak, I want to go back to, despite the devastating U.S. strikes that we've seen, the U.S. having entered the war, the Ayatollah regime does not seem to be backing down. They have threatened retaliation. And we know, as you mentioned, that they are essentially hanging on by a thread, and it can go either way inside Iran. I mean, so what game are they playing at? I mean, are they more likely to cut their losses, reach some kind of agreement now, or are they really intent on going up against the force of the United States Army?
Well, first of all, I cannot predict, but I would say the Iranian regime is smart enough to know that they cannot go to a full-scale war against the US, despite all the rhetoric. At the same time, as a dictatorship, they cannot be humiliated, because if a dictatorship is humiliated, then its power base inside the country is shaken or is threatened. Therefore, they will probably try to respond in some way, but at the same time, not to go to full-scale war. And I would guess that they would also have to ask themselves, to reconsider the entire strategy. It is possible, conceivable, that they will decide maybe to rush toward nuclear capability. That is, despite the blows that they have suffered, that they have no other choice because all their other strategy had failed, or that they may decide not today or tomorrow, but let's say in a while, that they have no other choice, that they have to, as Ayatollah Khomeini said, to drink the chalice of poison and reach some agreement with the US, now in much worse terms than could have gotten 3 weeks ago. And again, everything is open.
Absolutely. Now, Miri, I want to turn back to you. Israel is continuing to fight this war against Iran, of course, but we can't forget that Israel is also fighting a war in Gaza. How is the war in Iran impacting IDF operations in Gaza? And also, are we going to possibly see Iran's other proxies like Hezbollah joining in the war effort now on behalf of Iran?
I'll start with the second half because in its own way, it's easier. Hezbollah, and I don't know a lot of Yiddish, has done bupkis for the last 10 days. And this was the Iranian invested main proxy, that the capabilities that the Islamic regime gave to Hezbollah over a period of 20 years were supposed to be the immediate response just in case somebody would attack on the Iranian soil. Zero, nothing, absolutely nothing. Not since June 13th and not since this morning, since the US came in. So that answers on Hezbollah. That has to do with what Israel did against Hezbollah's capabilities last year. It has to do with us achieving, in that sense, a real degradation of those capabilities, and in the aftermath of that, making sure that the Islamic regime could not resupply Hezbollah. When it comes to the fighting in the Gaza Strip against Hamas, against Islamic Jihad, when it comes to our 50 hostages, and it's now 50, 3 more were brought back today, 3 more bodies were brought back today. When we talk about those, I'm much more somber. There aren't, what can I say, smoking, it's not a question of a smoking gun. There are no real surprises on what the IDF can do against the Hamas and the Gaza Strip. But to be very clear, the not even humiliation, but the vulnerability that Professor Litvak spoke about, that has to do with what was shown about Iran, weakens Hamas as well, because the heads of Hamas sat in Iran and Tehran, not just in Qatar and not just in Turkey. And in that sense, the fact that suddenly Iran is not there for anybody, not even for itself, that will have an impact. It won't change the actual fighting on the ground on the Gaza Strip.
So the region still volatile. Anything can happen and everything is open. Thank you so much to our distinguished panel. Thank you all for all of your insights and for joining us today.